Then on Sports Central, we go over our 2022 college football predictions for the Baylor Bears, potentially the biggest surprise team of the 2021 college football season, as this team went 12-2 overall. They won the Big 12 championship and also won a New Year's Six bowl game in the 2021 season. I mean, considering this team was 2-7 in the 2020 season, and honestly, it looked like this team was going to be a lost cause going into 2021. I'd say that was a great season for the Bears. But how they be in 2022? That's what we go over here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predicting their schedule game by game in this video. Starting out with your team trends. Baylor once again 12-2 last season, so I mean nothing short of an outstanding season for the Bears. And at the end of the day, seeing how they fared out at the end of the season, I mean, I would say this team was the best team outside the college football playoff last year. You had, I mean, their huge run at the end of the season. They beat Oklahoma, number 8 team in the nation. They're 27-14. I mean, they beat them by nearly 2 touchdowns. Beat K-State 20-10. They were decent. They beat Oklahoma State 21-16 in the Big 12 title game. That was a massive win there, and that set them up to play in the Sugar Bowl against Ole Miss, and they beat them 21-7. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Baylor, I mean, this team, they finished out as the 5th best team in the nation, and I'm pretty convinced that Baylor last season was the best team to not be in the college football playoff, just based off of the run that they had in the last month of action and into the postseason, of course, with the huge Big 12 championship win and, of course, the Sugar Bowl as well over Ole Miss. So, I mean, 12-2, and considering Baylor going into 2021, this team looked very young, very inexperienced. There were a lot of question marks, and we didn't know too much about Baylor going into last season, but I mean, turns out it was a great season for this team. Roster preview, though, going into 2022 here, and this team has got some significant changes once again going into 2022. You got Gary Bohannon, who is transferring away. He is off to South Florida, so that was a surprise seeing him leave after his season last year. He played decent. He was a bit inconsistent at times with this team last year, but his stats weren't terrible. 2,200 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks, and a 63% completion rate. He also rushed for just over 300 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. So Gary Bohannon wasn't terrible last year. I mean, this was just his first season as a full-time starting quarterback. So, I mean, it wasn't a bad season for him by any stretch, but we'll see how he does, as he won't be with Baylor next season, and instead South Florida. The backfield loses 2 key players there. Abram Smith, the top running back, is gone. He put up 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, and Tristan Ebner, he is also gone. Second running back on this team who put up over 1,000 yards. So backfield, huge question mark there. I would already say, I mean, the quarterback situation, that's also a question mark for me. I mean, Jacob Zeno, he's transferred out, and it looks like Blake Shapen is going to be the primary starting quarterback for this team, which, I mean, from what we saw of him last season when he did play, he actually played very well. He put up 600 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks, and a 72% completion rate when he did play. He didn't play too much, but, I mean, he shows potential. I do like Blake Shapen. I feel like he's definitely a quarterback that's got a high ceiling, so we'll see how he does taking on the role that Gary Bohannon had last season. The receiving core, you also lose a couple of key players there. Tyquan Thornton, you're losing him, and of course he was a huge impact player for this team, putting up nearly 1,000 yards of receiving, 10 touchdowns as well. You also lose your second receiver, R.J. Sneed. He is transferred away. Last season he put up 500 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then of course Drew Estrada, he is also gone. So your receiving core loses your top 3, your backfield loses your top 2. Your quarterback is transferred away, but I feel like you'll be just fine with Blake Shapen. But I mean, your top in receiving from last season that's coming back is a tight end, and that's Ben Sims. Last season he put up 360 yards and 7 touchdowns. So I mean, he was definitely a key impact player for this team last year. But I mean, you got multiple question marks all over this offense. You also lose 2 offensive linemen, 1 linebacker, 4 in the secondary. So this secondary is losing. I mean, you're losing 4 there as well. The defensive line looks pretty good. Linebacking situation looks okay as well, but the secondary, that will be potentially an area of concern going into 2022 here. But I mean, brings up the questions: will the Bears reach the same level in 2022? I mean, going 12-2, that is no easy thing to do. And Baylor, I mean, they honestly kind of came out of nowhere even throughout the season. I mean, it looked like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State were 2 top teams for the majority of the season, but Baylor kind of snuck up and came out of nowhere and took that title. And once they beat OU there in November, that was when Baylor really started to be taken seriously. But I mean, it's going to be tough for this team to reach that level again. I feel like this team, I mean, Dave Aranda, he did an excellent job with this team last season. I mean, it was pretty incredible what he was able to do. And I mean, going into next season, I feel like this team, they got potential to get up to a similar level, but I just don't know. With the amount of losses that are here, this team is going to be a bit more inexperienced, but I certainly think this team they've got a bright future. I think the ceiling it's fairly high, but at the same time, the floor is fairly low for this team going into next season. Transfer portal and recruiting, of course, you got Gary Bohannon transferring out once again. You got Josh Landry going to Missouri, defensive lineman. Sneed's going off to Colorado. You bring in defensive lineman Jackson Player from Tulsa, and you're losing receiver Colby White, Jacob Zeno, Tyrone Brown, safety as well, but you do bring in a receiver from LSU there, and Josh Erb, a linebacker there from LSU, and Josh White. Recruiting-wise, 36th in the nation. You are 5th in the Big 12, which isn't terrible. You got 2 4-stars coming in and then 19 3-stars. So, I mean, 36th in the nation isn't excellent, but of course for the Big 12, I mean, it's not awful. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. And this schedule, of course, it's actually fairly tough. I mean, you got to play BYU on the road, and BYU, they should be a good team next season once again. I mean, the Cougars, that is not an easy non-conference game there. And of course, BYU is soon to be joining the Big 12, so we'll be seeing Baylor and BYU playing each other a lot more in the future. But that won't be an easy game there going on the road to Provo. And then you got Iowa State on the road to finish out your September. That's your first conference game. You got Oklahoma State, which will be a huge one on October 1st. That's a home game this season. You got West Virginia on the road, Kansas at home, Texas Tech on the road. And then in November, you got OU on the road, Kansas State at home. You got TCU at home, and then Texas on the road to finish out the season. So you got to play OU and Texas on the road. K-State should be decent. And you also go Oklahoma State at home. So it is a challenging schedule. But I certainly think that Baylor, and when it comes down to it, I mean, this team, I mean, they will be a bit younger next season in a lot of areas, especially on the offense. So, I mean, once again, the receiving core and the backfield are my 2 main concerns. And we'll see how this team does. And if some guys can step up and have good seasons and play at a high level there, I think Baylor's going to be just fine. But looking at September here, Albany, easy win. And then you got BYU on the road. Now, that's a game that I feel like the Cougars, I mean, Jaron Hall's coming back for them. They're looking really good going into 2022. I think BYU is going to be a 9 to 10 win team potentially next season. So BYU, they're going to be good. I feel like Baylor going on the road in week 2, it's going to be tough. And I'm going to give the Cougars the win there in a close one. Then you got Texas State at home, easy win there. Iowa State on the road, that game is a 50-50 game for me. I'm really not expecting the Cyclones to be too good next season. I mean, they disappointed me in the 2021 season, and they're losing a lot of talent after last season. So Iowa State, they're kind of in a rebuilding phase like going into next season, but with it being on the road, I feel like the Cyclones steal a win from Baylor there. So you start out the season 2-2. You got Oklahoma State at home, that's going to be a loss, and West Virginia as well on the road, that's also going to be a loss. West Virginia, that team's a potential dark horse. I mean, they've got some potential going into next season. And I mean, if you look at, Oklahoma State there, I expect them, they're probably my favorite to win the Big 12 right now, just based off of, they're returning a lot of the key players. And of course, if you look at West Virginia, they could be good. JT Daniels, of course, has been, he's been plagued by injuries, but JT Daniels going into West Virginia, potentially he's an impact player for them, and he leads them to a good season. So I got you guys starting out the season 2-3. I think it's just a challenging, or 2-4. It's just a challenging start there. You got Kansas at home, easy win there, and then Texas Tech, you'll beat them as well. So you're 4-4 heading into November. Once again, I just feel like the inexperience on this team comes back to bite a little bit. And it's gonna be a very different team offensively, especially next season. But looking at November, Oklahoma on the road, that's also a challenging one. I'm gonna give OU the win there. K-State at home, TCU at home. I will give you a win against K-State. That would be a huge win. I feel like K-State is a 7-9 win team next season, so that would be a huge one there. You beat them, you beat TCU at home, so you get to 6-5 heading into that Texas matchup. And of course, the Longhorns should be decent next season. Quinn Ewers, of course, is the main storyline for them, and Texas, I can see them with 10 wins easily. So I do want to favor the Longhorns in that matchup. So I do have Baylor disappointing next season. I got them at 6-6. And of course, if you compare that to 12-2 from last season, I'm sure, yeah, that's a disappointment going from 12-2 to 6-6. And I could be wrong. Baylor could surprise me again and put up a 10-11 win season. Who knows? But I just feel like, once again, this offense is going to look totally different next season. No Gary Bahanen. The backfield's losing two key players there. Those two players, Treston Ebner, and of course you got Abram Smith. Those two losses are not going to be easy. It's going to be tough to replace those guys. And of course, in the receiving core, losing your top three wideouts, not going to be easy. So offensively, I think this team struggles a bit next season. And 6-6. If you can get to a bowl game, that'd be a good season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Baylor. And I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.